If you ask my passports, I'm Mongolian American. I was born in Chicago and lived in the US until I was 6 years old. In 2011, I moved to Mongolia, my parents' homeland, and lived there for 11 years. When I got into Northwestern, I came back to the US. Whenever someone asks me where I'm from, it's always Mongolia. My first year at Northwestern was pretty rocky. Coming from a country where I was the majority to all of a sudden the minority was something I had to adjust to. But being a minority within the minority was even more challenging. Not having Mongolians or even Mongolian Americans around me for my first year was an isolating experience. I remember for my international student orientation, the organizers split up the students into their respective countries to make up teams for an ice-breaking game. While Chinese, Korean, Russian, and other international students joined forces to yell out their nation's name in a patriotic fashion, students of underrepresented international countries like me idly sat by. At times when I talked to international students, I could sympathize with a lot of their experiences, like growing up outside the US, but could never really relate to visa or job sponsorship jokes. These experiences really made me reflect on my identity as an Asian American, or if I really am Asian American. One thing that sets international students apart from Americans is simply looking at the way they read time. The most mundane part of my day became a spectacle to my American friends and a relatable conversation starter with my international peers. Whether the time was 6:30 p.m. or 18:30, Americans couldn't fathom how I read in their definition military time. In Mongolia, I never really had boba. The mention of milk tea always made me think of sutetse, a Mongolian milk tea consisting of just milk, tea, water, and salt rather than boba. In Evanston, you could find numerous boba shops scattered throughout town. On campus, boba is sold indoors and even through a vending machine in tech. It's a go-to drink and dessert to grab for a lot of my Asian American friends. It's a vital part of their lives and identity, so it's interesting to get used to never drinking it to almost having it every week. They seem silly, but these experiences really made me wonder, am I really Asian American? I didn't fit the mold for your stereotypical Asian American. I was raised in a Central Asian culture rather than an East Asian culture like China or Korea. When one thinks of Asian Americans, they think of the model minority, wealthy Asian Americans with great jobs in STEM. But I grew up in a lower income family with hopes to do something in journalism or media. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center, Mongolian Americans have one of the highest rates of poverty among Asian Americans in the US. Although I thought I didn't fit being an Asian American, I too felt conflicted about seeing myself as the flip side, Asian. In Mongolia, I myself was pretty whitewashed. When I first came to Mongolia, all my relatives perceived me as a foreigner because I wasn't Mongolian born. I also went to an international school where I spoke English most of the time and interacted with peers who also were born abroad or were foreign. But I've lived there most of my life. I'm more comfortable and used to Mongolian culture. That's my home. My 6-year-old self seems so distant. It makes me wonder, what if my parents never went back to Mongolia and we stayed in Chicago? Who would my 6-year-old self grow up to? Would I have ended up more Asian American, or would I have ended up the person I am today?